Welcome to FO Talks. We're joined today by Steve Wesley to discuss the electrification of everything. FO Talks is brought to you by Fair Observer, a platform for citizen journalism, which has 2,500 contributors from over 90 different countries. And we would love you to join the conversation. So please do subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, and of course, you can publish with us. Steve Wesley is a tech titan. He helped take eBay public. He founded a clean tech venture capital firm, the Wesley Group, and has sat on the board of Tesla Motors. He's also had a fantastic political career. He served the state of California as controller and CFO under Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and an academic career as a lecturer at Stanford Business School. And we are very honored that he's made the time to join us today. We would love you at home to get involved, so please do send us your questions here on Zoom or on Facebook. We'd like to get as many questions as possible, and it would be fantastic if we could get some people who'd ask those directly to Steve by switching on their cameras and doing it that way. We will be hearing from Steve for about 15 minutes, then there'll be about half an hour of questions and answers. So please, Steve, do take over.
Well, good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I think we've got a global audience. I want you all to know I'm a big fan for Fair Observer, and I read it daily and have occasionally written for the publication. I think we have a better world when people are active participants. And I just want to say on behalf of the United States, I am glad that our country will once again be rejoining the global order of calm and dispassionate discussion. So I want to say that I'm going to give you kind of a very rapid world tour with a number of slides, but I would love to challenge you to come in anytime. I'll stop at any point, take questions. Claire is a professional MC, and we want to make this as participative as possible. So with that, I just want to start out. Millions of people in America unemployed, tens of millions globally, were facing the growing threat of global warming. What to do? And the short answer is we're facing an opportunity that has never been before us before. And that is the opportunity to move rapidly into a world of sustainable energy and what is increasingly referred to as the electrification of everything. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how this could and should jumpstart the global economy and to help prevent global warming. Next slide. So I love this slide. This is kind of global view of energy for the last 100 years. And as you can see, looking back, coal used to supply around the turn of the 1900s, almost all of the world's energy. That quickly changed. And for most of my life in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you can see that oil and eventually natural gas sort of ruled the roost. But here's the dramatic thing. Of the four carbon fuels you will see on the left, they are virtually all going down through the remainder of the next century. And what is stunning here is you will see renewables pass all of them in the next 15 years. And I'm here to tell you it's going to happen sooner. What's so striking about this slide is not, from liberal Californians like myself or the Sierra Club. This is what the oil industry is projecting. The demise of their own industry. And I'm simply here to tell you it's going to happen faster. It's going to create opportunities we've never heretofore had and how we can take advantage of it. Next slide. I want to take you on a little historical trip. I used to work fresh out of college. I packed up my bags and moved from Silicon Valley and at Stanford University out to the Department of Energy to make my mark in the world. And I worked in the first Department of Energy. We were filled with enthusiasm to change the world and move us toward a world of renewables because we'd just gotten through an oil shock in the 70s. The rub was the cost per watt to install solar was $77. And at that point, as you can see here, you just don't install much solar. It's out of the money. It's hard to make sense. And as it went on, the cost came down to $60 a watt, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. And no one was buying it. It was still out of the money. And what's fascinating here, and what you see in this slide is we founded our venture fund in 2007, and you can see what that looked like here. And people were saying at that point, solar had come down to $4 a watt, and we were predicting the growth curve you can see here of solar, because it had been zero. Looking backwards, people thought we were just, you can probably guess, crazy Californians. But click the slide. This is what really happened. And the whole point is, when you're a venture capitalist or a policymaker, you can't make policy by looking backwards. You have to look for the inflection point, whether it's mobile phones, solar, or the internet. Next slide. Next. So this is energy in one slide. And if you can just take a mental note of this, it will help you understand where the world is going. In simple terms, we reached an inflection point at about 2015. And at that point, for the first time in history, because I showed you before, if you were installing solar and you were a utility or even on your home, you were probably losing money till about 2015. At that point, in virtually every part of the world, solar and wind became a cheaper alternative than any carbon-based fuel, including natural gas. So what's the missing part? The missing component to this new world I'm talking about? The short answer is power storage. And what I want you to know is I was actually serving on the board. If you look at the bottom, this is the cost per kilowatt hour for storage, because I think we all grasp solar is wonderful, non-polluting, wind is fabulous. But what happens when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow? And the answer is you need battery storage. When I was at Tesla, we made extraordinary vehicles in 2010 when the first one came out. The problem was at $1,100 a kilowatt hour for those batteries, it was really just a plaything of the wedge. But as you can see, over the last decade, cost of lithium-ion batteries has gone down 90%, making them broadly available to the point now where in 2019, virtually every auto company in the world began going all electric. Most auto companies didn't want to say this because they didn't want to spook investors. The cost of retooling dozens and dozens of plants, billions of dollars, these firms could risk bankruptcy, but they began quietly going through their own inflection point. By next year, you will see the cost of lithium-ion batteries go down, cost per kilowatt hour below $90. And then for the first time, you will see electric vehicles not only being better for the planet, but costing less than any comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. That's why the world is going electric so quickly. Next slide. What I wanted to give you a sense of is this movement toward the electrification of everything has been going on for 50 years. But what I want you to understand is just like the curves I've showed you, and because of that last slide I just shared with you, the slope is accelerating even more quickly in the last 2 years since this was done. Next slide. What we're moving toward is a world of the electrification of everything. It's not only transforming the world of autos and vehicles, it's transforming the world of buildings and the world of industry. This year, globally, over 2/3 of all new power that goes online, whether you're in China, India, South America, Africa, globally, over 2/3 of all new energy added will be renewable. This is the world we live in. And we're rapidly heading toward a time where when there is enough solar on the homes of enough people and the world is using electric cars, you may never be paying a penny to your utility or a gas station again. This is the new world we're looking at.
Can I just interject in just a minute there, Steve? I'm so sorry, but we've had so many questions about this cost issue that you've raised. How low can that cost go?
So coming up in 2 slides, we'll talk about just that. The curve will flatten at some point, but it will be, we believe, in the $90 range by next year and probably well under $100 per kilowatt hour of this year. Now, please note, there's a little bit of a disparity between the cost of the batteries and the cost of the full pack, because you still need to pack them together, whether you're putting it in a home or hospital or university for storage or in a vehicle. But this is the total pack number, and it's coming down quickly, and I can tell you more about why. Other questions, Claire?
Oh, we've had loads. I didn't know if you wanted to address them after your talk and carry on for now. Just I wanted to raise the cost issue because a few people have mentioned that, so the others can perhaps wait.
All right. Well, happy to stop anytime. I want to be responsive to the audience. Tracy, flip to the next slide. So here's what I want to give you a picture of. Make no mistake, lithium-ion batteries are the new oil, at least for the next 2 or 3 decades. And what I find so fascinating is you can see there are really 4 global leaders. China, who got on this quickly because they don't have an intrinsic supply of oil. Korea, Samsung, and you're familiar with LG Chem. America finally getting on board with Tesla and some other companies, and Japan with Panasonic. Europeans have been late to the game, but they're coming quickly. But what I wanted you to see is that there are really just 4 companies that are dominating this race for what I call the new oil, lithium-ion batteries. Next slide. This is a slide I love because even with this extraordinary ramping up, and keep in mind, China has gone from fewer than 9 lithium-ion facilities a decade ago to over 100 today, and they're building them as fast as they can. And even now, the demand will be largely uncovered in the next 4 or 5 years. We cannot build the facilities quickly enough. And that is one of the reasons that Elon Musk is not only partnering with everyone, but also building his own facilities so he can control the destiny of his company, the world's largest electric vehicle company. Next slide. Some of you may say, I'm not so sure the world is going all electric vehicles. I'm not seeing it yet. And it's true. Here are the numbers in Europe. 2019, 3% of the vehicles were electric. 2020 jumped up to 10. This year, I think it'll be well over 15. The US is following close behind as the cost for cars comes down. Places like Norway already at over 50% electric vehicle sales. Make no mistake, this is the future. I just thought this slide would be interesting to you to show you that virtually auto companies in every part of the world are spending tens of billions of dollars to make sure they don't get lost in the transition to the next major technology shift. By the way, if you're wondering who is in a position to ever catch up with Tesla, take a look at Volkswagen. That is many people's best bet. And Hyundai is coming up quickly on the outside. Next slide. This is one of my favorites. I think some of you know Tesla's share price today is still over $800. But even at the price at the end of the year, 668, Tesla's market cap was greater than Toyota, Volkswagen, Daimler, GM, Ford, BMW, Ferrari, Honda, Hyundai combined. Make no mistake, there is no auto company in the world that is confused about where the future is going. And let me just pause here. People say, why is it so important? Steve likes electric cars. They're sort of cool. Here's the big aha. Let me go back in time. 45 years, Jimmy Carter comes out with what is called the CAFE standard, requiring America to move beyond their gas guzzlers and increase the average vehicle miles per gallon to roughly 26 miles per gallon. There is no change for over a quarter century, almost 40 years. And President Obama comes out and says, we're going to raise it to 36 miles per gallon. By the way, when Jimmy Carter said it, they said, you're a socialist, you're going to destroy the auto companies and so on and so on. 40 years later, no movement whatsoever in CAFE standards. And people said the same thing about President Obama. The fact is, every major automaker in the world is already making more fuel efficient vehicles for markets like Europe and Asia and places where people know better. But the stunning thing you should take away is while the average fleet efficiency will become 36 miles per gallon in the US and is already above that in Europe, the average Tesla Model 3 gets a miles per gallon equivalent of over 125 miles per gallon. So this is a 5x efficiency improvement we're getting. You rarely see that. And here's the news. Well, the batteries will get yet more efficient. The real improvement in efficiency will be as the utilities move increasingly to renewables, the BTU conversion will give electric cars in the future the equivalent of 200 miles per gallon. That is the future we're looking for, is we're putting workers in America, Europe, and Asia back to work, building plants and vehicles of the future. Next slide. I'm just going to run through this, but Tesla is making a bold move to dominate the global auto and energy markets. They do not view themselves as just a car company. They correctly realize that the world of cars and energy are coming together. This is no longer two separate industries, but one, because the key component, batteries of cars and energy, is the same thing, and it'll be lithium-ion batteries. So Tesla, a leader in reducing the costs. Again, I believe they'll be with their new battery format at $90 or below. They're working on batteries and vehicles that will last for the equivalent of 1 million miles. They're taking out cobalt and the other nickel, more environmentally damaging substances. And Tesla's already applied for utility status in Europe, where they will increasingly, and Australia, be using their batteries to enter the energy industry. And if you wonder how crazy is that Tesla share price, just ask yourself, who else has a vision that's quite as big as Mr. Musk's? Next slide. I just want to leave you with 3 of my favorite slides. And this one on the left, just 10 years ago, 10 largest market cap companies in the world, 5 of them are energy companies. 10 years later, the energy companies are all gone, dominated by technology companies, with the exception of Tesla, that I'd urge all of you to increasingly think of as the world's first technology, auto, and energy company. We'll see how they fare. Next slide. This is one of my other favorites. I'm in the venture business, and I've also been in the public service. I want to see us move towards this new world of sustainability. And when we founded our fund 13 years ago, I went to all sorts of investors, more than you could imagine, saying, we have a vision for a green future. And everybody said, Steve, this sounds great, but show me the list of exits. Otherwise, we're not going to give you any money. It was dreadfully hard. We eventually raised our fund, but this sheet before you now was empty. Today, 13 years later, there's over a dozen billion-dollar unicorns of the leaders in this smart energy, smart mobility, smart building space. And if you look carefully, over half of them are $10 billion decacorns, and one of them is $100 billion, multi-$100 billion centacorn. And what I want to suggest is this whole industry sector of smart energy and mobility that has gone from non-existent, a blank sheet, to perhaps the hottest growing sector in the world. One other thing you should remember, not one company on this page is over 17 years old. We had an early investor called IBM, and they stopped investing with us, and they told us they didn't think the sustainability sector was really big enough for them to be interested in. And I had to tell them recently, one of the companies in our portfolio that had just 27 people when he invested, Tesla, now has a market cap 7 times the size of IBM. So a lot of people missed this turn in the road, but it's a great turn for the planet. The last slide.
Steve, I don't know if we should wait until the very end, or if I can just jump in with a couple of questions about Tesla.
Jump in with questions.
Well, just about Tesla specifically, you talk about it as if it's obviously this fantastic success story, but somebody's asked, well, was that rise as a result of government subsidies and support, or was it on merit alone?
I would suggest to you that few things in life are merit alone. When we invested, we wouldn't have invested had the government not made a $465 million investment. By the way, the US government came under much criticism for that, but obviously it turned out to be one of the best investments in the world. Tesla now employs over 65,000 people. So there was some government stimulus in the beginning, but relatively small, far smaller than what the Europeans did with the German solar program or what the Chinese do on a daily basis. As a rule, America doesn't always do the best job of picking winners, but in this case, they hit a grand slam. Other questions, Claire?
No, please do carry on, Steve, and we'll go back to the questions after you finished.
You bet. Well, let me tie up here with two thoughts for you. First, as you know, I grew up in America. I grew up in Silicon Valley when there was nothing here except for Stanford University, Hewlett Packard, and fruit trees. And that's all there was. And the saying or mantra of the day was, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what my dad always said. But there's a new mantra here now, and it's the mantra for the next century. And that is from Steve Jobs, who said about the iPod after lashing the team on, and they finally introduced the iPod and they beat the Sony Walkman and it was revolutionary. And Steve Jobs said, great, back to work. I have a new idea. And his message was, if you're not cannibalizing yourself, someone else will. That's what we're trying to do in America with firms like Tesla, that's cannibalizing the American auto industry and to some extent the global auto industry. But that is repeating itself in every industry in the world. Our goal, I think, as a nation and as a planet, is to give our workforce the tools they need to be job ready, to get these 21st century jobs that can change our world in an environmentally appropriate way and can help give people good paying jobs at the same time. So with that, let me stop, throw it open to questions. I'm dying to hear what people have to say.
Excellent. Well, perhaps we should go to the issue of batteries. We've had a few questions about them. Anushka Sebek asks, aren't batteries just as polluting because of the need for rare earth materials to make them? And she also asks, are any of the chemicals needed for batteries recyclable? Perhaps you can address that.
Yeah. So the short answer is no. Batteries can be toxic. They need to be recycled in a certain way, but they're nowhere near as damaging as the coal and oil industries whose problems are well documented. But what you will see is that the more toxic chemicals in batteries, again, cobalt, nickel, these areas, especially severe problems with child labor standards in Africa and so on, they will be taken out of batteries. Tesla is now working on the first cobalt-less battery, and we're getting better at recycling all of the time. But I will tell you flat out, as someone who's driven an electric car for 10 years, the diminution in the battery storage is not as great as people had feared. My car, 10 years, still running better than ever. And as a net, when the world can make a jump from a fleet average of 26 miles per gallon to one of 200 miles per gallon, where we're rapidly heading, that is a win-win for the planet. Other questions?
Sure. Okay. Going to Bill Byrne here, who says your point about four companies dominating the batteries market, I presume he means, is insightful. He says in most asset-intensive businesses, the three largest companies earned commanding profit shares over their peers. Do you see the same happening in the battery industry, or is it too early to tell?
First, I know Bill, and he's a very well-known executive, so good to see you. That's not the case. The battery business is global. It's a commodity like oil. The margins will be thin because of the sheer size and magnitude of what's going on. And I didn't fully explain, but there's a revolution in batteries, not just in vehicles. You already know there's one in smartphones and laptops, but you will soon see virtually every home and building in the world with a battery. Your universities, your hospitals will all have batteries so that they can do time of day pricing. They can generate power from solar during the day, store it in batteries at night. And what you will see is an arbitrage, three-way arbitrage between cars, utilities, and buildings based on the time of day. And your car will someday be part of the global economy as it gives and receives energy based on the time of day. That will enable us to avoid what's called peak load shaving and never having to turn on the dirtiest energy power plants.
Okay,
Other questions?
Sure. So some people are asking, I'll just summarize a couple of questions, whether we're going to see a transformation at a grid level or rather at a sort of individual homes and businesses level. What's your view on that? Whether electricity production is going to happen on a big scale?
this is the best news ever, because just like computers, and I still remember in the old days, if you wanted to use a computer, you had to go down to a centralized place, stand in line, you might be able to use it or you might not. And if you did, you wouldn't get your answers back for a day or two. And then we moved to a distributed system. And everybody can see the improvements in lifestyle when you go on the internet, communicate with friends and pictures, and Zoom calls like this, as well as smart vehicles. It's awesome. We're entering that same world for energy. We will not be 100% dependent on receiving energy from a power plant. We will not be dependent on having to use nuclear or fuel sources that we may not like. And I think the best thing in the world is the democratization of energy that was never possible before. And you will see a new 21st century grid that enables more and more people to produce and transport their own power. By the way, in California, some people think this is still science fiction. New law passed not 3 weeks ago, January 1st, but a year and 3 weeks ago, already requiring every new home in California to be built with solar on the roof. If you're a utility, you're keeping a very close eye on this one because it means someone is busy cannibalizing them.
No, absolutely. Also, a couple of questions about hydrogen. Obviously, we've been in the news that the hydrogen-powered vehicles. What's your view on them as opposed to battery-operated vehicles?
So, as a technology, hydrogen is fine. It's just way out of the money. So for us, and I love sustainable energy and want to see a greener world, but hydrogen would be one of the last steps to get us there because it is so expensive. Now, people say, aren't those hydrogen cars amazing? No pollution coming out the back end, zero. Just a little bit of water drips out the tailpipe. It's awesome. The rub is making hydrogen is one of the most energy intense things in the world. And what we're really working toward is not a brown hydrogen solution, which is really still largely carbon based, driven by a lot of use of natural gas, to a green or blue hydrogen solution. But that's still costly, probably 5 or 10 years out. By the way, I talked about the electrification of everything. That's just not just cars and vehicles and trucks and homes. It will be increasingly boats, trains, and if there's one thing I thought I knew for sure is that you wouldn't see electric airplanes because batteries are heavy and airplanes have to be light. And how do you make that work? But we've seen over 40 business plans for electric airplane companies. They're coming. It's still 5 to 10 years out, but you will see for short haul electric vehicles in the next 10 to 15 years. Norway has required all short haul flights by 20, I believe, 40 be done by electric aircraft.
Interesting. Well, you've given a very positive view so far. I've got a very interesting question here from John Norwood, which is, what's your biggest fear in this area?
So my biggest fear is that we've already taken too long. We in California in particular can already see the dramatically negative impacts of global warming with increasing forest fires all the time. We're seeing the impact in our oceans. So my biggest fear is that we move quickly enough to make sure we haven't gone too far. One of the next big areas, and it's not cost efficient yet, but the world's best and brightest minds are working on it, is carbon capture and carbon sequestration, where we can not only stop putting more gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, we can actually start sucking some of it out. But I think it will test the scientific minds of all of us, as well as our compassion and discipline to do the right thing for the planet. But the data is becoming clearer each year. We'll get a final reckoning soon.
Absolutely. I suppose one question I had in mind, if I don't can just interject with my question, is whether clean tech actually will provide us all those answers, or whether we need to radically overhaul our lifestyles, stop flying so much, stop consuming so much.
So the reality is people are not wired to do that. We're going to be using more energy, whether it's your smartphone, your laptop, your electric vehicle. People love using it. It's hard to change that particular human behavior. But I believe the advances in technology will keep us well on the right side of this curve. And again, as I said before, we're moving toward a world where An increasing number of people have solar on the roofs. They'll use electric vehicles. Our use of carbon-based fuels will move very close to zero. The question will be, how quickly can we suck the carbon we've been putting in the atmosphere for the last 200 years out, and what can we do to heal our oceans and forests and so on? So the work's not done. I couldn't be happier that the US will be rejoining the Paris protocols, and hopefully we can turn what appears now to be a conflict between US and China and other nations into a collaborative effort to jointly heal the planet we all sit on together.
If can just shift to a slightly different topic, some people have been asking about nuclear energy. Is that, someone said here, can we get to this future that you describe without nuclear energy? Can we just rely on renewables?
So the short answer is I believe we can. Most scientists would tell you renewables will solve 80 to 90% of the world's energy needs over time. But there's always going to be that other 10 or 15% of places where it is just hard to get renewables and you may need other sources. It could be nuclear, it could be hydrogen in certain cases. The rub with nuclear, and again, I have 15 of the world's largest energy companies as investors in our fund. So I'm not anti-utility or anti-energy in any way. That is my business and for whom I work. But even the utility executives will tell you nuclear is a very, very expensive alternative for them. The solutions to storing it are not really solved today. And because of the cost, public opinion, and the long-term hazards to the environment, I don't believe nuclear will expand. There's a lot of work being done on new small modular nuclear facilities that could show great improvements, but the sheer cost, especially the upfront and carry cost, makes it very hard for utilities to use.
Okay, a couple of questions here about policymakers. What can policymakers do to accelerate this adoption of electrification? That's from Nancy Boyd-Thompson.
Yeah, so Nancy is actually a famous leader in the sustainability movement in the US. She's been the president of what's called the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. What's happening here, and it's interesting that she raised it, there are two things that can be done. We need utilities to get out front on the sustainability issue, provide incentives for people to do the right thing, whether it's a greater use of EVs and so on. The other thing that I think is important is there's an increasing number of cities that are passing ordinances, started with Berkeley and most recently the city of San Jose, the 10th largest city in the United States, have said they will not provide permits for natural gas appliances. So that's something else we'll see. It's an interesting issue. The oil industry has sold this natural gas as the clean fuel or the transition fuel. It may be a transition fuel, but it's going to be a shorter transition than people think, and it's certainly not a clean fuel at all. Natural gas has about half the effluent of coal plants. It is not good for the planet in any way, and the sooner we can wean ourselves off it, the better.
Great. I'm going to combine a couple of slightly different types of questions, but they basically talk about things outside of California. So apparently someone said here that there is some pushback in terms of all electric homes outside of California. People want to rely on gas. They don't want everything to be electric. Someone also here has raised the issue of pollution in Africa and saying that there's a huge amount of oil and gas being used there in companies, and what can be done to help combat this pollution over in Africa. They've said what companies are available to help capture these toxic pollutants as a way to reduce the problem of global warming. So really, what's happening outside of California to sort of help address this problem?
You bet. So let me answer those in order. First, look, I know a lot of people love their gas appliances. My wife would be one of them. I would simply say two things there. First, electric appliances are getting better all the time, and I would urge people to do the right thing for the planet. And I would just use the analogy quickly. I still remember in the 60s when the tobacco companies said, cigarettes don't cause cancer. no relation to lung cancer whatsoever. And that was finally debunked as utterly ridiculous. We know cigarettes cause cancer. But my point is, we didn't all run out and say, you know what, let's give the kids cigarettes with filters because it's only half as bad. And that's what the oil industry is doing today with natural gas. So if you feel you have to have that natural gas appliance, just know you're giving your kids the cigarette with filters on. You're slowly killing the planet, and I hope we can all move beyond that. Africa is one of the big issues. You know, U.S., largest polluter in the world for 50 years. China, unfortunately, passed us and is showing no sense of slowing down. They are the largest user of coal. China is really the linchpin now. U.S. needs to do a better job. We need to get back in Paris. We need to continue to lead. But China is the tough issue. And with 1.3 billion people, I get it. But what we need is a global accord to make sure China and India begin to reduce their use of carbon-based fuels. Africa, as the fastest growing continent, will then be the next linchpin for the planet. And I believe the developing countries not only need to help Africa financially, but with the technologies necessary to leapfrog what it took the US 75 years to do within a decade or two. And I think working cooperatively, we can make that happen.
You mentioned China just there, and John Skull has asked, what are your views on the US-China relationship, both for overall trade and for climate change?
Well, my wife's Chinese and our kids are half and half, so I need to be careful here. Look, the US-China relationship is the most important relationship in the world. And again, some areas economically we're going to compete, but on energy, we are both in the same boat, occupying the same planet. And the only excuse I can make for the US is for many years in the 40s, 50s, 60s, we just didn't understand global warming and the impacts. Since roughly 1970, there's no excuse. There's less now for China. What needs to happen is the US and China need to form bilateral relationships, both to scale back, just like the US and Russia did with nuclear missiles in the 80s. But China has got to be part of this, and we need to sort of turn down the finger pointing and come back with a mutual relationship. India will be, again, the next big linchpin with probably closer to 1.4 billion people. And being a much poorer country, it doesn't have quite as much latitude as China does. China also has, you can argue it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but in energy policy, it may be an advantage to be an autocracy. It is a dictatorship. They can change like that. It's messier in a democracy like India has. So we'll see how those two shake out. It's where the history of the world is being written.
Absolutely. A couple of people asking about Solar City and US producers of solar panels. I don't know if you can say a few words on that.
Sorry, cities using solar energy or the
Sorry,
companies?
it's John Norwood here saying, tell us about Solar City and US producers of solar panels and their ability to compete with China.
So, look, there were dozens of solar companies that became, popular in the U.S. in the early 2000s. And what happened is the Chinese government, appropriately or not, you can argue either side, heavily subsidized their solar industry and basically undercut the major European and US solar companies. Today, the US has only a handful remaining, but we've done a good job of keeping costs down. China looks like a leader in solar production, but because solar panels are heavy, the US will continue to have some leaders like Solar City, Sun Power, and First Solar. But every country in the world, Canada, Japan, will try to hang on to some level of solar production for strategic reasons. It's important for any nation, just as having access to oil was.
Okay. Oh, we've got a strange question here, but kind of an interesting one since you're close to Elon Musk. James White has said Elon has left California. Why is that?
Well, so I've worked with Elon Musk for 30 years, back to before Tesla, and he recruited me to his board, where I served for 3 years and chaired the audit committee. And I think Elon Musk is irascible, challenging, difficult, but probably the Steve Jobs of our time. He left California because he is now, today, the wealthiest person in America, to go to Texas because Texas has no income tax and California has quite a high one. So we'll see how long that lasts. Frankly, if I were the wealthiest guy in the world, I think I'd go live where I wanted to, not where I could save money on taxes. I don't think
Yeah,
it's
fair enough. Sticking with the topic, actually, of Elon Musk, another person here, Martin Bloom, asked, what do you think Tesla will look like in 3 to 5 years' time? What kind of activities will they be up to?
Well, 3 points. First, as you can tell, I'm a big believer in Tesla, but I just want everybody to know, I think the share price is going down. Great company, but probably not worth $800 billion. That having been said, you should know that Tesla is diversifying in 4 areas that every other auto company in the world needs to do, and they're doing it faster than anybody else. First, you have control of your battery supply. Tesla does, others don't. Second, are you just selling a car or are you selling a smart device? For reasons that still astonish me, Tesla was the first car company to have every car internet enabled. It was a smart device. It took other firms as much as 8 to 10 years to figure this out, and it wasn't that hard. Third, they've diversified into energy. And again, we used to think there are energy companies here and car companies here. You must understand in the future they're coming together. The fourth thing is, it's important when you're an investor like I am to understand the difference between a commodity company like oil or a battery company, or frankly, folks, even cars, and one where you can have big margins like software. Car companies frequently only make $800 to $1,000 of profit per vehicle. It is what's referred to as a small or low margin area. And what Tesla has done is they realized before others that the real margins, and part of the way they've gotten to profitability, is by selling what's called over the air or OTA futures. So they will have what's called a SaaS model and an ability to make an ongoing revenue stream from every car they sell. The other car companies are lagging behind badly. So those are the 4 things to look for in the auto industry, and Tesla's well ahead of the others, but I wouldn't be jumping into the stock just now.
Okay, we'll have to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, but if I can just ask one last question, just really looking ahead, now that you've got Biden in well, soon in the White House, what's the prospects for the US? Will it be rejoining the UN? What is it now? Oh gosh, can you remind me what it is? The climate agreements.
Sure, the Paris protocols, but also the World Health Organization is key. Look, I want to say this to everybody outside of the country. I've known Joe Biden for 34 years. We've done events for him in our home, and I've been to his home. He represents the best of America. He is known as the nicest person in American politics. He has a complete international focus. I think you can expect him to quickly reestablish the US's commitment to the United Nations, to NATO, to working closely with the European Union, and to expanding our relationships in Asia. He understands the importance of multilateral agreements, and I think he will restore normalcy in America. Donald Trump, I think historically will be remembered as the worst president in our history. It's an anomaly, and I think it's something many Americans already regret. But there's still an issue out there. Why did so many people fall behind Donald Trump? And I think the short answer is American policymakers were not speaking to their issues, of giving them the appropriate education to get a good job in the 21st century. That's the real error that America has made. And when you don't do that, sometimes people seek desperate solutions instead of common sense solutions. I think Joe Biden will put us back on that common sense path.
Okay, Steve, thank you so much for your insights. We've had so many comments and questions, and everyone's bowled over by what you said. So gives us a lot of hope, I think. So let me just say thank you to Steve, and thank you very much to our viewers and our questioners. And you can continue the discussion at Fair Observer. So do subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, and of course you can publish with us. So if this moves you to write, then please do submit us an article. We'd love to hear your views. So thank you so much to you, Steve.
Claire, thank you. Can you help me with an accent like yours?
Takes a lifetime of practice, Steve.
I'll work on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And so please do join us and become a fair observer.
All right. Thank you.